So, a couple years ago, in the middle of the night, I wake up to this, like a scene or like an image. This guy is asking this other guy, "Where'd you park your spaceship?" And in the middle of the night, I laugh like, what? This woke me up? Huh? Some guy asking some guy, "Where'd you park your spaceship?" And I fall back asleep. I remember it the next morning. And the next morning, I'm like, what a weird thing in the night. Just this picture of like a glimpse of a scene in which this one guy is asking this other guy a question. A couple nights later, I wake up again. And this guy is asking this guy the same question. "Where'd you park your spaceship?" Only this time, I have questions. Well, how does this guy feel about this question? Oh, he doesn't like this question at all. He's terrified by this question. It's a horror. Everything has gone wrong if this guy is asking this guy this question. And I find myself wondering why. And I'm almost like I'm interviewing the story. Well, what's this guy's name? The guy who's being asked the question. Well, his name is Heen Grubers, HEEN-GRU-BARES. Okay, Heen Grubers. Well, the guy asking the question, what's his name? His name is Dill Tudd. D-I-L-L-T-U-D-D. Dill Tudd. Yeah, well, wait. If he's asking him a question about spaceship, are they on Earth? No, they're not. They're on a different planet. What planet? Furdus. Furdus. Yeah. How do you spell that? F-I-R-D-U-S. And you know I love to name things. So it's just joy. And so I remember the next morning in the clothes closet, I had this pad and pen, you know, like grocery store stuff, fix the door, that kind of thing. Writing down some of this. Where'd you park your spaceship? Furdus, Heen Grubers, Dill Tudd. He does not like this question. Why doesn't he like this question? And I find myself following this story. Like it's like living in me. And I make a few more notes the next day. And, well, if they're not on Earth, what happened to the Earth? Oh, the Earth didn't make it. And I remember having that like, oh, that's the first line of the, what is this again? A story? What even is this thing that is just coming up from within me, around me, through me? And I get to page 2 in the notepad in the closet. Page 2 fills up. Over the next couple of days, weeks, page 3 fills up. It's as if there's this question. There's this question at the center. This guy asks this guy, "Where'd you park your spaceship?" But then it's almost like concentric circles start to grow outward. Because there's, well, how did we get to that moment on the planet Furdus? Oh, well, we have to go back to the end of the Earth. Okay, so we're going back. But then how does he respond? And what does that lead to? And what happens next? That goes forward. It's like the story just keeps growing in every direction. And it is bringing me like a pure delight, like a joy, like a certain kind of wonder, like, and then what happened? Well, why did that happen? Well, what happens next? Well, what is her name? Her name is Noonye. Well, how do you spell Noonye? Okay, so that character, and when does she appear in the story? Oh, she appears at this point. Oh, okay. So pretty soon it's like pages and pages and pages and pages of notes. And I had written a couple of stories and some books over the years, and I remember this moment like, you know that you have enough to start typing. You know there's enough here. But then this other resistant force was right there within me as well. Like, yeah, but come on, man. You have like stuff you're doing. You have like a job. You know, you have work. Permission. That's what happened. is I realized I needed to give myself, and only we can give ourselves permission. I needed to give myself permission to follow this story where it was taking me. And that just ran into a brick wall of, no, there's this other stuff I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah. And around that time, I had fallen surfing like bad, like 3-wave beat down, hold down, where you don't have enough breath and you like are genuinely panicked, like a terror, like, am I going to make it? And the fin of my surfboard had sliced open my chest, and I had bruises all down the front of my body. So I literally had to like sit in a chair for like a good week there because I could like barely move. But I could feel something. It's the feeling of death, but the kind of good death, because something wants to be born. I could feel that something was dying in me, but I hadn't been able to articulate it. Like a whole thing I could sense was coming to an end. And then Jesus the Christ started showing up, and his last name is the Christ. And he and I go way back, and it's always has been very personal. And Jesus the Christ was very clear. He was like, hey, you've been telling my stories for 30 years, Rob Bell, but it's getting awkward. Because he's really funny. He's really direct, and he has no shame ever, because everything belongs. Everything has been reconciled. So he never has any shame about the past, but he's just like, hey, you've been telling my story for 30 years, my stories, and good job, well done, respect, but now it's getting awkward because you have stories to tell. You just want to tell these stories? And it was like a kid. I was like, yeah, I do. I do, I really do. I really do. And he was like, good, well done, well done. This chapter, let's wrap this chapter up, and now, get on with it. Let's go. I'm telling you, it was so clear and like, whew. Even the emotion now, whew. Yeah, so I sit down and I start typing. Because there was a particular kind of work that I've been doing for 30 years. I begin to see it as I begin to write this story, this Where'd You Park Your Spaceship, whatever it is. I can see my own personal history in a new way. That I was born into this particular tradition known as Christianity, and I had been trying to make sense of it since I was a kid. What is this thing, this family and tradition that I was born into, that in many ways is reflective of a larger American global thing, system, matrix, hairball, movement, that this work I'd been doing, and I happened to have a microphone and it was my job, but this work I'd been doing involved separating babies from bathwater. That what about this is good and is necessary and helps us expand and move forward, and what about this needs to be left behind? It's actually destructive, and it is inhibiting human flourishing here on earth. And the nature of this work I'd been doing, there was this parsing of this over here, and there is a weight to that, and I loved it, but I was coming to the end of it. Because sometimes that's what happens. You come to the end of something, and not because anything's wrong, not because it's just you've come to the end of it. And that's what was happening. Like, there's this other thing to do now. Yeah. So I made a ritual, because sometimes you have to mark these things. They have to do like a sacred marking of we've come to the end of something. Sometimes you see it later. You look back and you're like, oh, that was a big moment in my life. Other times in it, you're like, oh, this is a big moment. And I I do this ritual in my backyard, like, this has been a wonderful life, and now I'm going to do something else. When the password on your computer for a while is new job, that should tell you something. So I start typing, and the other books that I'd written, generally a couple hours in the morning, and then I was cooked. Like a couple hours, then it was like, can I go out and play? Can I get some fresh air? But I start writing this Where'd You Park Your Spaceship story, and I take our daughter to school, come home, sit down, start typing, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh wait, I'm late to pick her up from school. It becomes like the day, and then the next day, and then the next day. I go to the grocery store and I get groceries and I plan out lunch for the week so that I don't even have to think about it, because I want to be so dialed in to this. All energies are going to this story. At one point, I tell Kristen, my job, I'm doing that kind of on the edges or weekends or evenings or margins, because all day long, I've been writing a story called Where'd You Park Your Spaceship? And I don't think any publisher is interested. I don't know if you guys are ever gonna care. All I know is it's the most meaningful, exhilarating, substantive, creative experience I've ever had. But I don't know if it's gonna ever be anything. And she says, yeah, of course. How else would it work? At one point, the first draft is 750 pages. And I say to her, my story's huge. Later, I took out a massive amount of it because I realized, oh, that's another book. At some point, it was like, oh, wait, that's book 2. Oh, that's book 3. Oh, that's a secondary book that is sort of a supplement to book 2. But at one point, I tell her, it's 750 pages. And she says, Rob, not everybody thinks 750 pages is a good thing. I show a couple friends the first draft. One friend says, he says, you doing that work you were doing, the other books, that was great, but this is who I know you to be. He's like, this is what it's like to be your friend. this story. I find myself finding some, how do you even say this? It's that feeling when you do something that feels new, like a departure, like an evolution, but it's more you than ever. Yeah. And so I realized I'm going to need to publish this myself. This is new. So I start something called Backhouse Books, because partway through, one of the characters in the story writes a play, and the play that the character writes is called What's a Nucka? But I've written a play called What's a Nucka? So I published What's a Nucka? And it's so on the nose, it's so meta, self-referential, like, wait, this one character in Where'd You Park Your Spaceship writes a play called What's a Nucka? But then I publish What's a Nucka as a play separately. Like it's all, but it's like, once again, having to give myself permission. Having to give myself permission. Again, you can go around the world giving people permission for years. But then I had to again Rob Bell myself. Yeah, just do it how you would do it. Just make it as weird and strange as you want it to be. Just follow that. It's okay. It's actually the way forward. Yeah. So, last week, Where'd You Park Your Spaceship came out. Yeah, what a moment. And last week I did like a book launch art show celebration in Los Angeles. And there's this moment here in the garage where I'm loading these boxes of books into my car, and it's like starting over from the beginning. Yeah, it's like everything's new again. It's like we have no idea how it'll go. We know exactly how it'll go. We're having this experience. It's more meaningful and joyful than ever. What else is there? So now my friends and can read it, and anybody can read it, and what an experience. What an experience. And it starts in the middle of the night with this guy asking this guy, "Where'd you park your spaceship?" And it grows 2 years later into this, book 1, Welcome to Furtis. Who knew? Who knew? Who knew? It would go this way. I didn't.